Hi, Tony from All the Remote Things here again, and I've got Hemerson Paes with me today. How are you?
I'm very good, Tony. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, look, fantastic to have you here. Would you like to let everybody know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Hemerson Paes, based in Switzerland, Basel, and working with Hoffmann Roche. My mission in the organization is actually to create an adaptable and fluid organization. Right now, I'm focusing on enabling fluidity of capabilities to the most highest impacted, or the projects that create the highest impact to patients and customers.
That's very exciting, isn't it? So it's somewhere where you can actually make a difference, I think, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Oh, it's definitely a different place to be doing the kind of stuff that you're doing in. That's brilliant. Now, Emerson, let me just sort of preface how you came to my attention. You're part of the Remote Agility Framework community. For those that haven't heard of that, you can find that on our remoteaf.ca site. Click the community button and join our community. It's about all the remote things as such, and the framework itself. We're not there to sprint that, but that's how I sort of know you. And then secondly to that, you did a fantastic post on LinkedIn around collaborative networks and building adaptable organizations, and how you'd done some research, and I think it was over 1,800 different organizations and people that you'd spoken to. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that all came about?
Yeah. So the idea, Tony, is like we are used to to operating organizations following the tailored management or the scientific management, which is very structured, formal structures, fixed structures, roles, fixed jobs, and task lists where people go through. Reality, though, in a complex space, and as we move to a complex environment, in most of organizations that are innovative work actually in a complex space, we do not know very well what the output will be. So if you're very familiar with Zinofan model, most of in a manufacturing operating model, you have a complicated process where you know the inputs, you know what are the steps in the middle, and you know what's going to be the output. So with a very high level of confidence, when you tweak something, what's going to be the result. In a complex space, we do not understand. It's impossible for individuals to understand what are the relationship between the interfaces of the system, of the pieces of the system, and intervening in that system creates unexpected results. So instead of best practices, we need very adaptive and quick responses, interjections, learn and react. And that's how innovative companies work. That's how the pharmaceutical industry works, and actually that's how the healthcare system works. It's like complex system with multiple moving parts, multiple stakeholders. So then the question was, are we using the right approach to create the better benefits to patients by following a structure that is based on 19th century scientific management? And so therefore, we started exploring what it is, the real type of collaboration that exists inside the organization. So what we did first is to look inside the organization and look how people are actually working, how they're actually collaborating. So that comes to understand, the intention was to understand the interaction between individuals inside the same organization, who they partner with, who they trust, who they go for inspiration, who they go for ideas, and what we call building a map of actually the network. Reality is, I think we all know intuitively that even though we probably, most of us have a proper job title and a job role, that we work actually beyond the boundaries of those jobs.
Yes.
In order to reach any outcome, we need to seek support or seek inspiration, or even gain partnership for people that are stakeholders that are outside of our circle, the immediate circle. And even sometimes partner and work very close with individuals that are in different functions and different teams to achieve a meaningful outcome. And this is really the reality that we saw when we did this exercise. So we identified the collaborative clusters that had nothing to do with functions, with roles, and with jobs, with hierarchy levels. And we identify people that were centered into these collaborative clusters, people that were boundary spanned through the collaborative clusters. Turns out that we are not the only company looking into that and thinking like that. So there are other organizations that have done this work and have created a body of knowledge. It's based very much in network science, and transfer that knowledge of science to application on how to structure, how to basically define the operating model of organization that's more fluid and more adaptable. The second aspect is that if we really want to leverage the power of those collaborations, we need acknowledge that reality, and that's the reality. So rather than operating a space where we only look in a traditional organizational chart and with fixed lines of reporting, administrative reporting lines, we need to start looking into how actually people collaborate. What are the types of partnerships that they form, even beyond the need of their jobs. There are many of those relationships are established based on trust between individuals. So at the first, I maybe collaborate with you in a project, and maybe we form a partnership that goes beyond that project. And the next one, when I have a challenge, I say, hey, Tony is the right guy for this challenge, and I trust him, and I'm gonna go back to him. And I go and invite Tony to join on that project. So understand that dynamic.
I'm always the right guy. I'm always the right guy.
Yeah, you absolutely understand that dynamic. It's key. So that's what triggers us to understand if we want to help the healthcare ecosystem to actually unlock benefits to patients. And the barriers there could be any, Anthony. Bias, could be discrimination, could be financial access, could be bureaucracy. They're all barriers that exist in the ecosystem or in the healthcare system. To be able to do that, we need to understand how to play with those multi-stakeholders and how to actually develop partnerships that are beyond inside the organization. And to learn that, we need to start thinking differently about how people partner and how people develop relationships and develop trust. That was the real motivation behind all that. Naturally comes the business impact of it, right? So once you unlock that potential, we have seen increase in effectiveness by 20-25%. We have increase on initiatives, innovative initiatives by that magnitude as well. Because we start leveraging the relationships that actually make things happen, the partnerships, so how the people organize themselves to execute. And then we remove the barriers, which are reporting lines and administrative structures that actually prevent people from collaborating and cooperating in shared goals. We start creating visibility about people's capabilities and skills. So then it's easier for me to identify other colleagues that could partner with us because they have the right skills and right capabilities. And today, in a formal structure, most of what you do is based on jobs. You look into job descriptions and say, okay, maybe this person know how to do this, and yeah, it's not necessarily right. And maybe we are missing people that have very good skills and capability in certain type of work that is not necessary in that job. And the job doesn't tell that. The job title, the department they work doesn't tell that. They may have a responsibility for X, but the skills and capabilities may be more related to Z. They're just in the wrong place. So we unlock all these skills and capabilities to flow to the right project, to the right work. And we leverage the power of those connections rather than rely and unlock that collaboration, rather than leave it blocked in a formal structure, bureaucratic, that require authorization and permission. So that's how it came to be at the first.
Yeah, yeah. And when I saw it, it really struck me because at Remote AF, we talk a lot about, particularly when we talk about governing the system of work, right? and we talk about the collaborative connective tissues of an organisation, right? And when you don't do those things that you're talking about, and secondly, when you don't think about designing the system of work in a way that allows those collaborative connective tissues, then you truncate them, and therefore you have the issues that you're talking about. So that's what struck me so poignantly, because if you don't have that you don't have that flow of information both horizontally and vertically, therefore you don't have the transparency, you don't have the autonomy, you don't have the ability to make those expedient directional decisions, right? The other thing that I really took from your video post, which I thought was really great, was you looked at it and you categorized it, which was very interesting to me. So, for example, right collaboration. You had the fields of, I'm going to be honest, I'm reading this stuff off, right? Build the trust, small cohesive teams, the networks that need to be architected. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think, anyone listening to this would really be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the elements we did, so once we identifying these key those individuals that are actually centered to the collaborative clusters or the boundary spanners, or the build bridges between teams or clusters of collaboration, and others that create energy in the teams. People go for them for inspiration. We actually interviewed 200 of them to understand what is the source of their power, why they think people go for them, and also how they work, what the practices of work that they adopt. And we found interesting things, very good practices, and some and some not so good practices that actually impacted their well-being. So the very good ones is that 9% of them would say they make an effort to build trust and to develop relationships based on trust. And there are three elements of those trusts that they use. First is the competence-based trust. So they only commit to things they know they can add value. And if they cannot add value, they're not competent on it. They're very explicit about it. So they're very authentic. They don't try to hide, oh yeah, I'm going to help you on this stuff and I'm very good, but actually they're not. No, they say very clear, I'm not very competent on X. I can help you on Z. And I'm learning about B here, the topic B. So, but I cannot do anything about this other one you're asking. So that it helps them to build what competence-based trust. The second is integrity-based trust. So they have very strong values and they abide by that values. They don't compromise on those values. And they say, for instance, they believe that people have to have equal access to information or access to medicines. They don't compromise on that. That's their value. And even if it's against their own benefit, they will say, no, we're going to have to do this because that's what is the value I live for. So that creates integrity-based trust. And the third one, which is benevolence-based trust, most of them do what naturally. This is all done naturally, Tony. Some of them did not even have aware that use this language I mentioned to you is because we systematize and look at that, and we look outside, and that other companies have done the same analysis, and they come with this language. But the third one is the benevolence-based trust, which is they really they really listen empathically, and they take in consideration what are your needs. So in a teamwork, they would demonstrate that by pay attention to what's the state of mind and emotional state of the team members. The team members are not resources to get some results; they're people, and that kind of relationship, that treatment of between as humans and as colleagues and as partners is what build the benevolence-based trust. And this trust is like the glue that make things move. That's what inspire other people. That's what make them to, for instance, say, I'm going to do this. Nobody goes and double check what they're doing because people trust the competence, the integrity, and that they are doing the best for the interest of the team. So that makes their work very smooth, their cooperation very smooth. It's nearly is it the clue and is the currents of the cooperation. And it's an interesting result. Small teams help fantastically because when the teams are way too big, that type of interaction loses strength. Smaller teams of 8 up to 8 people, 9, 10, you still are able to people interact, nearly everyone interact with each other, and the trust, the psychological space, the psychological safety of the teams are palpable, and that trust is still sensible. People can actually feel that. Teams that when the teams expand way too much, 20 people, it becomes more like acquaintances rather than actually team members that know each other. And each one the bonds start losing a little bit. It's also interesting. Is also the same type of combination that makes decision effective. Around 8 individuals make take decision very effectively. And beyond that, it's just a conversation about a topic. It's very difficult to reach a decision with 20 to 25 team members. Now you need that core. So that's what we see as well, that the smaller teams are able to establish those bonds of trust, maintain that energy, and get decisions fast. And another element of trust that is relevant is because not always the team members will agree, and not always the solutions or the work they are doing is going to be accepted by the environment. So on those moments of tension is that trust comes to play, because team members accepted that others have a different perspective. They are not agreeing, but trust is there to know that, well, there is a competence there, or there is an integrity there is integrity value, or there is, I know even though we don't agree, there is the best interest. That person has the best interest in the group and for the group. And that helps unlock progress in the team. Even though they may not all agree with the same approach, they say, okay, I don't agree, Tony, on what you're saying, but if you think that's the best way to do, I'm behind you and I'm going to make it happen. I think different, but I follow you this time. And that's it.
You hear that,
the secret.
You hear that, my team? You need to follow me, right? Yeah, look, I think it's really interesting that you bring those threads together. But then what you also talked about was the part that leadership has to play in this, and how you had some numbers around the organisations that went really well. There was a high quotient of leadership involved in this, and there wasn't. Talk to me a little bit about that, because it was very interesting research.
Yeah. So of course, as we have the current organization structures that are based on formal hierarchies and fixed roles and fixed structures, there is a respect also in those structures for the formal authority, leadership, what you call the formal authority, right? Sometimes those individuals are actually trusted by many in the organization, and by the collaborative effort, by the trust that they build and develop in the organization. In our case, we found that only 1/3 of those people that are trusted across the network actually are in formal roles of leadership. So you'd have 2/3 that are what we call informal leaders. So the role of those informal position of power is because they have access to resources, either funds or even that they make decisions in terms of allocation of headcounts, right? So let's talk very pragmatically here. And they can definitely block or unleash the power of this collaboration by controlling those resources. So if a group of people get together and say, okay, we have to do this project and it costs this many, we need this much of fund, if they don't have access to that fund, in current structure of organizations, it's not like they can go outside and say, hey, let's issue some bonds or some stock options and then we get this fund. It doesn't happen like that. So they do have to get access to the funds inside the organization to capture that market opportunity. And the role of leaders is exactly on that. There is opportunity, of course, then for the leaders to take part on this and architect the organization that's more fluid and where financial resources flow to the projects of highest impact or the highest potential, or managing financial resources as in a portfolio of opportunities. Also unlocking re-engineering or redesigning the organization to not be fixed structure based on fixed structures and fixed jobs, but based on fluidity of capabilities to the highest impact. So basically deconstructing what brought them to the position of power that they have. And that requires a lot of maturity from leaders that are in a formal structure, because basically it's the recognition that what brought them there is probably not what's going to make the organization succeed in the future, and something new need to be experimented. So it's very few proportion of those leaders that are willing to take that risk. So they do play an important role on unlocking that potential, or a very important role in keeping that potential locked and untapped. So organization, the way we see is that organizations that are able to experiment and unlock those barriers or remove bureaucratic barriers to allow cooperation, they can progress. And research has been done from the Institute of Corporate Productivity that shows these practices, where I mentioned to you that even five practices of collaboration, like streamline collaboration, building enterprise connectivity, and the other three, they are highly adopted by high-performing organizations and very low adoption in low-performing organizations. So there is a correlation there. And same for unlocking collaboration or fostering cooperation across borders, across boundaries. So the organizations that are able to unlock this potential have a high potential of capturing more market share, generating more profit, and creating outstanding satisfied customers than organizations that don't. And in an environment like we are, those that and attract better talents. And in an environment that we are, those companies tend to do better. So yeah, leaders in a formal structure have a role in playing on that, and that role is make it happen or do nothing and just operate as the organization as it is.
Yeah, it's certainly something that we see happening out there, and it's that, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's that piece about they have to have the courage to take that step, right? Because to deconstruct or necessarily change the structure of leadership is a big step. And we do see those organizations that take that step often. It takes a moment, it takes a bit of a step in time, and it's not easy, but they reap the benefits as they go along. Now,
what's interesting is that you don't need really to eliminate formal management. What you need it's the awareness of that, which role they play there. So if they understand their role as controlling resources, then they are doomed, because they will be controlling, they will be creating barriers for collaboration. If you understand the roles as enabling the fluidity of those resources, those capabilities, so then all we have to do is redesigning structures that we inherited. We inherited it through the Taylor management system. So we have job descriptions, for instance, right? And the job and formal roles with specific tasks. What if those tasks make no sense anymore after few years of work, because the environment changed, the customers changed? So enable that fluidity of redesign of that work based on the customer needs. It's what they should be doing, right? So creating structures for that.
Couldn't agree more. Like I was speaking with Beate this morning from Beyond Budgeting, and he was making that exact point, just to bring that home and agree with you, that organizations that have grown up, that's how they've grown up. And that's how they grew to that point. But the point being is that won't get you to the next point. So therefore, you actually have to look at those structures, how you evolve that, and I heartily agree with what you're saying there. So throw over the top of that now, though, and this is the chat that you and I were having just before we came on air, was around remote and hybrid being thrown over it. So that's added an extra challenge to this. I don't think that's any news to anyone who's watching this. Your thoughts on it? Your thoughts on remote and hybrid, given what you just talked about and how that affects all of that?
Yeah. So even there was a research done, I don't remember who did that, but 35% of the chief HRs, right? So chief human resource officers, there go interesting name, and are concerned with the hybrid and how to make hybrid work, right? How to make it function in organization. And I think is one of the challenges that the organizations will be facing, traditional organizations will be facing, and it's not very different from our case and others. We had in the past an all office-based work, so at least 90%. There are of course individuals that will work remotely, no question about that. We had the distributed workforce as well, but majority was office-based or presence-based. And then COVID came, and then it flipped the 90% to 95% would be remote work, right? So we still had colleagues operating in manufacturing floors, and we needed to be a presence there in the operations. But now with at least with the removal or the minimization of risks from COVID and pandemic, then there is a good part that probably will return to interface and collaborate in the same physical space in the same time. So we can say like presence-based, and there will be a good part that will continue to be distributed. The reason for that could be many. One is personal choices, and of course, many companies also see the benefit of continuing with a distributed workforce. Because there is increase of efficiency and there is increase in flexibility on how that workforce as well can be deployed. There is the ability of cooperating, for instance, for teams like ours that operating in different countries, colleagues based in different countries that collaborated to in a shared outcome or in a shared goal, on a shared need that fulfill the needs of these multiple countries. It's much costly to meet in a regular basis or to work in this project if they have to be in a physical location, same physical location. It's more economical and sometimes even more effective to do that in a distributed way, because they still can interface and relate it to their local stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem, and then they convene in a distributed way, share what they have been learning, adapt, and then go to the market again and interact in the local market, which will be so costly to be traveling back and forth, not even mentioning the impact in the environment. However, when we did go to the all distributed space or virtual space with COVID, I do think we learned a lot, but it's still most was transference of, hey, that's how we do in the present space, let's just do it virtually. So we didn't not really adopt to the new practices or change the practices to be fit to the virtual environment 100%. And then that was a year and a half, 2 years of work like that. By the time we start learning how to do this, now there is the hybrid coming. And now how we do relearn these or readapt some of those working practices to a mixed space where some individuals are going to be present space in the same team and work virtually in other parts of the team members will be distributed. So we have to rethink now again. I don't think it will fit having the presence-based practice and then the virtual-based practice, and then we just put them together. I think it's something different. It's a third way, you know what I mean? And I think we we still have to learn how to do that. It's one thing that I'm very curious on, how to keep these bonds, the relationships, all this energy inside the team, but also how to make the teams, how to get the teams to be performing well, collaborating, share knowledge, share the work they are doing, and when they're in a hybrid context.
Look, I totally agree with you, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in this, right? About how this all works, and I think, you know, there's a couple of different ways I've seen this being done now. I was talking to an organisation just this morning where they've been remote or working in a distributed fashion since 2005, right? So they've been doing this for a very long time, and they, you know, their HR functions have embraced that. In fact, it's a completely different way of working. But what they did impart to me was that they still, even though they've been remote, they still manage to, at least once, you know, per period, they bring everyone together in the same place at the same time to reconnect those collaborations and those connections of the people. They also use it as a full week. Like they actually pay for people to stay and put them up, and they use that to work through the gnarly problems, to work how they're going to get together and all those things. And then when they go back again, they have that reconfigured energy. So that is one way to start doing that. The other point they made was, you know, because I said, well, that's reasonably costly. And they said, well, the point being here is we're not spending money on real estate. All that money that we've saved on real estate, we're actually turning that back into how we communicate, how we collaborate, and how we bring our people along the journey. So that's one piece of it. The second one I've seen, and I've said that on this show quite repeatedly, Hemerson, is that you've got it right. You can't take what we did in remote, you can't take hybrid, and you can't take physicality and just plonk it all together and go, that's going to work, right? What we do in physicality, we can't do in digitality, vice versa. However, what we have to think about, and we have to design that in a way, and the first principle that I talk to people about is, I'm not a fan of the word hybrid, and my reasoning around that is because the minute you have someone who's not in the office and you have other interactions outside of that group, then you're all remote. So therefore, you've got to start thinking about those ways that you can interact and you can create that ability to bring those things together.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the equity in the work as well, right? Plays a role. And yeah, I agree with you. I think I think that learning about that, relearning the rules and the interactions also it's how to establish and maintain those interactions in these multiple spaces is still going to be a challenge. I think technologically we could be helped. Organizations and teams could get some help for that as well. But yeah, it's one of the things I'm curious about, how to make work, because I think, Tony, in the end of the day, people will want to have the presence. If they have the presence, I imagine my colleagues that are based in Australia, for instance, they do want to get together and work. But if the 2 or 3 individuals of those are working also with other colleagues that are based in, let's say, UK or Canada, it's uneconomical to get them to be traveling all the time. So they have to establish new rules and ways of working that combine the benefits of presence, the strong ability to connect, presence-based, and also integrity and inclusion of the rest of the team members. So.
Hemerson, look, we're really close to the end of our time, and it's been fantastic talking to you about this. And I hope that anyone who's listening to this has really raised some questions and answers and things like that as well. And in saying that, how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk to you about this a bit more?
Mostly my LinkedIn profile. So it's my name, Hemerson, AGMERSO. And that's the best way to reach out. Send me a message there. I may not reply immediately, but I do reach out and I reach back.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can contact you. The other way that you can also contact him is if you join our remote AF community, which you can
Yes.
find it on remoteaf.co. You press the community button, you can join the community. Hemerson's in that community as well. And we have lots of conversations like the ones we've had today. If you're listening to this and you really enjoyed it, look, like, subscribe, amplify, join us, all the remote things for all things remote. Really enjoyed having you here today, Hemerson. Thanks a lot again.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure.